637 Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Thank you very much for joining us. For a Friday, thank the Lord. One guy I know that's happy is Friday is, of course, Matthew Hurtt, who is our Grassroots political analyst and joining us here on the Newsmaker Hotline. Matthew, always great to have you on. And it was a last-minute call this morning to have you on just because there's so much political intrigue going on right now. And so one of the things that I thought was interesting was this story about how the Republicans want to, and some people are saying they want to anoint, other people saying they want to crown Donald Trump as the presumptive nominee. And Matthew, this has really ticked off a lot of Nikki Haley supporters.
Dan, it's great to be with you, and I never sleep, so I was ready for your text this morning. And I'll tell you, next week, the Republican National Committee is meeting in Las Vegas. I will be there. I've been to almost every Republican National Committee meeting since 2013. And let me tell you, the guy who's behind this is a guy named Dave Bossie. He's the committeeman from Maryland. He's a friend of mine, and he's a political genius, really. I don't know. I haven't spoken with him about the motivation for this proposed resolution, but it's one of two things. The evil genius, I say, is that he proposed this in anticipation that Donald Trump would react and respond in the way that he did yesterday and cause news. The second guess is perhaps that he really wanted to push this resolution through the Republican National Committee next week to close this nomination process. I'm opposed, as a grassroots conservative activist, I'm opposed to the party picking winners and losers and nominees. I am 100% in support of the voters picking winners. It looks like in this instance, the voters are going to do the same thing the Republican National Committee wants to do, but there is not really much reason for the RNC to pass a resolution like this. However, you know, it's made news. We're talking about it this morning. Yep. The talking heads in D.C. are talking about it, and it's certainly going to be the headline headed into Las Vegas next week. Well,
Matthew, let me ask you, because you said something about how Donald Trump reacted yesterday, and he knew how Donald Trump would react. There's a lot of Donald Trump reaction out there on a bunch of different things. Which particular reaction are you talking about?
Well, Donald Trump said, you know, thank you so much for the confidence that you've placed in me as the presumptive nominee, but I ask you not to go forward with this. And here's what happens when there's a Republican in the White House, and there isn't one right now for sure, but when there's a Republican in the White House, the RNC takes its cues from the Republican president. And so frequently what you'll see and what we saw in the 4 years of the Trump administration was members of the RNC would first go to the White House and ask permission to push a resolution through the RNC. I suspect, though I can't confirm, that this resolution was sent over to the Trump campaign. Dave Bossie is very connected to the Trump campaign. He was on the campaign in 2016 and I believe in 2020. And there is no doubt in my mind, or there is little doubt in my mind, that the Trump campaign knew this resolution was coming forward in anticipation of Donald Trump again reacting the way that he did, saying thanks, but no thanks. I want to do this with the voters.
And that makes sense. And I'm with you, by the way. When I saw that, I thought, no, we don't. It's almost like with Trump, you know, going after Nikki Haley as hard as he has been. I just feel like he needs to let nature take its course. Let's go to South Carolina, where ultimately I believe that, you know, that will clearly be the sign that the American people, particularly in South Carolina, which is where Nikki Haley was a governor for 2 terms, where the American people will make their decision. I understand, though, why some people would say that they want to do this because Trump really does. Biden has already decided to move on and go into general election mode, whatever really that means. He's been going after Trump for quite some time. But Trump needs to start going down the road of uniting the party. Is he able to do that, Matthew Hurtt, with Nikki Haley still in the race?
You know, Trump's speech in Iowa was magnanimous. It was unifying. It was encouraging to see. You know, we've got to rally the Republicans around this campaign and head toward the general election. His speech in New Hampshire was quite a bit different, an attack on Nikki Haley. But she wasn't congenial either. It really depends. I think Nikki Haley is believing her own messaging points, and at this point, there is no path forward for Nikki Haley in this Republican primary. And I think that the longer she stays in, the longer we have to contend with this intra-party contest, and Donald Trump can't contend with Joe Biden. Now, is that the best option? I'm not sure. Again, I like to see these primary contests play out and give the most number of voters access to express themselves. We have only had 2 primaries. We've got Super Tuesday around the corner in March, of course, South Carolina at the end of February, and Nevada. And I want the voters to have a say. I think the Republican Party is better off when more Republicans make their voices heard in primary contests and nominating contests and things of that nature. So I think that, by July, this will all be a footnote in the 2024 election cycle. Our political memories are pretty short, but, Donald Trump will be focused on Joe Biden. And then really the average voter who isn't tuned in, who isn't even listening to a program like this, they're not paying attention until August or September anyway. So this is exciting to talk about, and particularly for Republican primary voters who haven't gone to the polls yet. They want that opportunity to vote affirmatively for most of them for Donald Trump, I would say at this point, and some for Nikki Haley. Now, this is a bit of an antagonistic approach to the Haley voters who Donald Trump does want heading into November. If we lose the suburbs in Virginia, or we lose educated voters in other parts of the country, college-educated voters, then that is going to be troublesome for Republicans, not only for Donald Trump, but for down-ballot races to hold the House and to retake the Senate. And right now, the map looks really good. There are about 7 Senate opportunities for pickup for conservatives and for Republicans. And if Donald Trump unifies the Republican Party and goes forward, then we have a tremendous opportunity this November.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN Grassroots political analyst Matthew Hurtt is joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. Matthew, you talked about how, generally speaking, and I know this is true, the majority of people, it drives me crazy, majority of people aren't even paying attention right now to everything that's going on. Do you think that this political cycle, though, may be a little different because of the images that we've seen coming across the southern border and because of the very hot political issues and topics of discussions where we're talking about, the terrorist attack on Israel. We are talking about the border. The politics used to be really dry and boring. I don't know if that's the case anymore. And I do wonder, with Donald Trump involved again, if by and large more of the American people are paying attention.
I think since 2016, and particularly part of the Trump phenomenon, we've seen 3 kinds of Americans. There are the people who aren't paying attention, the people who are paying attention, and the people who have checked out. And those are the people who have moved through the process and they aren't paying attention because they're, upset about something that's happened over the last several years. But, we've got a little bit of a psychology class this morning. Abraham Maslow has this hierarchy of needs, and most Americans are trying to meet physiological and safety needs. Those are basic needs: food, water, warmth, rest, security, and safety. And until they can meet those basic needs, we talk about this all the time, putting food on the table, saving for retirement, making the mortgage, then they don't have the capacity to consider other things that are happening to them. Once they get past those basic needs and into psychological needs, esteem needs and belongingness and love needs, I think the political side sort of sits in the belongingness. I want to be part of a group. I want to be part of this effort. Then people start to think about politics. The good news for me, look, I'm a small L libertarian. I don't want people to think about government, and I don't want government really to be involved in the day-to-day aspect of our lives. It's only when government does something to someone that most people start paying attention. If you can't open the business that you want to open because the zoning codes are too restrictive, if you can't start a food truck, if you can't go to work, or if you get your first pay stub. I worked at a movie theater in Murfreesboro as my first job, and I got my first paycheck, and then I saw the taxes, and I said, what is this? So most people don't think about their relationship to government until government does something to them.
Yep.
And once that happens, they start to think, and then they get plugged in and they say, oh, what's going on the border? What's going on with crime? Or what's going on in the economy? And then they start to think about these issues.
Next time you're in studio, Matthew, let's talk about how we became. I mean, you're a small L libertarian. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what I am. I'm not a Republican. I think I'm closer to conservative, independent, whatever, maybe a libertarian, but I'm just all over the place. But the bottom line is that you and I have a very similar journey, because it wasn't until I got that first paycheck when I was working at a restaurant, and I looked at my paycheck and I realized all the money that was being taken out, and the more money that was taken out, my dad slowly started to explain to me, what government was and what government did and what government was doing to me and what they were doing with my money. And it led me to where I am today. I got to ask you real quick. We have this situation on the southern border. We've got this big standoff you've got Greg Abbott, you've got President Biden, the barbed wire, and all that's going on. And in the midst of all of this, you've got President Trump being accused of torpedoing the close to a deal, apparently, between Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer on the southern border. And part of these concessions, there's a lot of very conservative Republicans who are saying, no way would we ever accept that. Give me your brief 90-second analysis, if you would, on everything that's going on. I know it's only 90 seconds, but everything that's going on with Greg Abbott, the Supreme Court, Joe Biden, and Mitch McConnell. It's all connected, and I think a lot of people are really angry.
The Constitution says it is the federal government's job to secure the border. Joe Biden is not doing that. There is no question about it. He has put border governors in an untenable position. Greg Abbott is a leader, and he has been joined by 25 other Republican governors. Glenn Youngkin here in Virginia is one of them, and he's doing the best that he can. But this is a federal problem. Unfortunately, on the Senate side, Senate Republicans, this is the Lucy and the football analogy, Senate Republicans always get duped by Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, and it remains to be seen what's going to happen. I think Donald Trump has good political instinct. I don't know what the resolution is before the election, unfortunately, but we have a humanitarian crisis on the border, and Joe Biden is not doing anything about it. It is causing drugs to come into this country. It's increasing human trafficking. There are deaths on the border. It's increasing crime in border towns, and it is a serious problem, and Joe Biden has failed to solve this problem.
And what's amazing, too, is they're blaming Trump for, torpedoing this deal by having the ear of the conservatives in the Senate and in the House. But if it's a bad deal for America, it's a bad deal for America. And ultimately, if people find out what was in this deal, it actually makes sense for this deal to go by the wayside. If Donald Trump, you could say that Donald Trump could be blamed for it. You could also say that the former president should get credit for torpedoing this deal, if he did. And I don't know if he did or not.
It's better to have, in this specific instance, it's better to have no deal than a bad deal, because a bad deal doesn't solve the problem at the border. Again, there are countless millions of people. We are a magnet, as Uncle Phil said, and we want to demagnetize to the extent that we can. But America is that shining city on the hill, and people want to come here, but they cannot do it through the cartels and through human trafficking and through this porous open border to the south that is not securing our safety and upholding the Constitution. It's outrageous.
All right, Matthew, how can folks find you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at Matthew Hurtt, MatthewHurtt.